The luxury fashion boutique, Vander Co, shimmered under the glow of its crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing off the polished glass surfaces. Inside, the air was thick with opulence, staff dressed impeccably, wealthy customers gliding between displays with the effortless confidence of those accustomed to extravagance. Lisa and David Carter stepped through the grand entrance. Lisa wore a tailored blazer over sleek black trousers, her heels clicking lightly against the glossy wooden floors. Beside her, David's understated yet perfectly fitted suit complemented the classic Rolex on his wrist. They moved with an air of quiet confidence, not ostentatious, not hurried, just a couple enjoying a leisurely shopping trip. From his post near the entrance, Jack Simmons, the store's security guard, watched them intently. His gaze wasn't welcoming, it was skeptical. They didn't fit the usual profile of Vander Co. It's clientele. Lisa stopped at a display of red leather handbags, running her fingers over the supple material as she glanced at the price tag. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a firm voice cut through the space behind her. "Excuse me, but this area is for real customers only." Lisa turned around. Standing before her was a tall man in a crisp navy security uniform, his arms folded across his chest. His expression wasn't one of politeness. It was one of doubt. David raised an eyebrow, the ease in his demeanor faltering for the first time. "Excuse me, what exactly do you mean by that?" Jack stood firm, his posture rigid. "I just want to make sure you actually intend to make a purchase. If not, I'll have to ask you to leave." A few nearby shoppers had already begun to take notice. Curious glances turned into murmurs, subtle side-eyes exchanged between those who suddenly found the confrontation more interesting than their shopping. Lisa took a slow breath, steadying herself. "We haven't done anything wrong," Jack smirked. "Look, I don't want any trouble, but this store has standards. If you're not planning on buying anything, it's best not to disturb the other customers." David felt his temper rise. He stepped forward, his voice lowering to a controlled yet unmistakable warning. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Jack didn't flinch. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Lisa placed a hand on her husband's arm, silently telling him to hold back. She met Jack's stare, her voice no longer soft. "So we're being asked to leave simply because you think we don't belong here?" Jack nodded without hesitation. "That's right." In that moment, Lisa knew there was no reasoning with someone whose mind had already been made up. She exchanged a glance with David before turning on her heel and walking toward the exit. David let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head in disdain before following her. As they stepped outside, Jack stood tall, smug satisfaction on his face. He thought he had done his job, preserving the image of Vander Co., but 10 minutes later he would learn he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Jack stood at his usual spot by the entrance, hands clasped behind his back, still watching Lisa and David as they walked away. He lifted his chin slightly, proud of himself for doing what he thought was his duty, protecting the store's exclusivity. To him, this was just another day, just another couple who didn't fit the mold. But as he turned back toward the security desk, he noticed Sarah, a fellow guard, watching him. Her expression wasn't approving. It was uncertain. "Are you sure you did the right thing?" she asked, her voice laced with hesitation. Jack shrugged. "I did what needed to be done. If they linger too long, other customers might feel uncomfortable." Sarah frowned. "Did someone actually complain?" Jack hesitated for a split second before shaking his head. "Not yet, but they would have eventually. People like them don't usually buy anything." Sarah bit her lip but simply sighed. "I don't think they were the kind of people you assumed they were." Jack didn't care. As far as he was concerned, the matter was settled. He pulled out his phone, casually scrolling through messages, completely at ease, as if he had just completed an important task. But minutes later, the atmosphere inside the store changed. A shift in energy, a quiet tension. The automatic glass doors slid open again. This time, it wasn't a new customer walking in. It was a woman with a commanding presence, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. A tailored black suit hugged her frame, her hair pulled into a flawless bun. Emily Parker. The moment Jack saw her, a chill ran down his spine. Emily wasn't just another shopper. She was the regional director of Vander Co., a woman with the power to change the entire store's policies with a single decision. And worse, She was walking straight toward the store manager, her expression like ice. Jack stood frozen, a creeping unease settling deep in his chest. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but inside, something was shifting. Sarah blinked, glancing between Jack and Emily as she disappeared behind the doors leading to the store's executive offices. "Do you know who she is?" Sarah whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. Jack swallowed hard. "Of course I do. But why is she here?" Sarah didn't take her eyes off the office doors. "It must be something serious," she murmured, her tone heavier than before. Jack didn't respond. For the first time that night, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. Just 10 minutes ago, he had been certain he was doing the right thing. But now, a different question took shape in his head. Had he just made a terrible mistake? Outside the store, Lisa sat in the passenger seat of their car, her eyes fixed on the city lights reflected in the windshield. Her phone rested in her hands, fingers idly scrolling across the screen, though her mind was anything but calm. Beside her, David hadn't started the car. His hands rested on the steering wheel, his fingers tapping rhythmically, a habit of his when he was holding back his anger. Silence stretched between them, not the kind that signaled nothing to say, but the kind that came from emotions so strong, words weren't enough to contain them. Finally, David exhaled, his voice low but heavy. "This is driving me insane." Lisa didn't look at him. Her voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. "I'm not letting this go." David turned to her. He knew that look. It wasn't just anger. It was unshakable determination. "Lisa, I know what you're thinking," he said, hesitation creeping into his voice. "But are you sure? You know how these things go. We can complain, but in the end, it just keeps happening." Lisa finally turned to face him, her eyes burning with restrained fury. "So what? We just let it happen again? Let them treat us like we don't belong and pretend it doesn't matter?" David sighed, his grip on the wheel tightening. He knew she was right. This wasn't the first time. A look, a shift in tone, a quiet, unspoken doubt hanging in the air. It was always the same. Every single time. "We could just leave," David said, though even he didn't believe his own words. Lisa let out a short, humorless laugh. "You think I can just let this go?" She didn't wait for an answer. Her phone screen lit up, and in the next second, her fingers were moving. No hesitation. No second guessing. David glanced at the screen. He didn't need to ask who she was texting. He already knew. Emily Parker. A name that could send chills down the spine of anyone working for Vander Co. Moments later, Lisa's phone buzzed with a reply. A single, curt message. "I'm on my way. Meet me in 5 minutes." Lisa set the phone down, eyes still locked on the screen. David let out a low chuckle, shaking his head, not in frustration, but in something that felt a lot like admiration. That security guard just messed with the wrong person. Lisa's voice was calm, but razor-sharp, a quiet declaration of war. "He's going to regret it." David didn't say another word. He simply started the engine, the low hum breaking the silence as the car rolled forward, not away from the store, but back toward it. This time, they weren't just customers anymore. Inside the store, Jack still stood in his usual spot, but the smugness from earlier was gone. Something had shifted. The air in the store felt different. He could sense it, even if he didn't yet understand why. Nearby, Sarah glanced at him again, curiosity flickering in her eyes. She had never seen him look this uneasy before. "Something wrong?" she asked. Jack scoffed, trying to mask his unease. "Nothing. Just, the manager got an urgent call from the regional director." Sarah's brows knitted together. "Emily Parker?" Jack nodded, feeling his throat go dry. That wasn't a name just anyone could dial directly. And then, the glass doors slid open once more. Lisa and David stepped inside again, but this time they weren't just customers. Their presence was different, more deliberate, more powerful. Their footsteps steady, their gazes sharp. Jack felt it instantly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And then his stomach dropped. They weren't alone. Emily Parker followed just a few steps behind them. Dressed in a sleek dark suit, she moved with quiet authority, each step measured, each motion deliberate. The store fell into stunned silence. Every employee stopped what they were doing. No one had expected her to show up. Sarah inhaled sharply. "Jack, you're in serious trouble." Jack went rigid. Emily didn't speak to anyone. She walked straight to the front desk, her voice cutting through the air like ice. "Get Michael. Now." Michael Reynolds, the store manager, appeared within seconds, his usual polished demeanor replaced with thinly veiled nervousness. He forced an uneasy smile. "Emily, I wasn't expecting you to visit." Emily cut him off, her gaze leaving no room for excuses. "I didn't have time to give you a heads up. Take me to the conference room. Now." Michael nodded on instinct. His eyes flicked toward Jack for a split second before quickly turning away. Lisa and David followed. Sarah leaned in closer to Jack and whispered, "You thinking about running?" Jack didn't answer. Because he couldn't. He knew it. This was just the beginning. The conference room door clicked shut, sealing off the sound of the store outside. No more background chatter, no more footsteps, no more whispers. Just silence. A suffocating, heavy silence. Jack sat stiffly, his pulse hammering against his ribs. It felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Across from him, Emily settled into her seat. She placed her iPad on the table, her fingers swiftly gliding across the screen. Beside her, Lisa and David sat without a word, their eyes never leaving him. Michael lowered himself into his chair as well, though he didn't dare speak first. Emily finally looked up. Her voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. "Explain yourself, Jack." Jack opened his mouth, only to realize he didn't know what to say. Lisa didn't give him time to figure it out. Her tone was composed but undeniably forceful. "I want to hear it from you. Tell me why you decided we didn't belong in this store." Jack felt himself being cornered. Every pair of eyes in the room was waiting for his answer. He swallowed hard. "I was just doing my job. I felt that they might not have been here to actually shop." David leaned forward, pressing his hands against the table. His voice dropped, each word sharp and deliberate. "You felt?" Jack hesitated. He had no answer. Emily slid her iPad toward him. The screen played surveillance footage, him stopping Lisa and David, telling them they needed to leave. No suspicious behavior, no attempt at theft, no justification for his actions. Nothing, except his assumption. There was only one undeniable truth. He had judged them the moment they walked in. Emily crossed her arms, her voice like ice. "Can you give me one reason why I should keep you?" Jack couldn't answer. There was nothing left to justify, no excuse that would hold up, no way out. Lisa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her gaze never leaving Jack. "So, is this the store's official policy?" she asked, her voice razor sharp. "Remind me again, who did you say the real customers were?" Jack had no response. The tension in the room thickened, suffocating. Emily nodded slowly. "All right," she said, her tone final. "I don't need to hear anything else." She locked eyes with Jack and delivered the two words that shattered his entire world. "You're fired." Jack froze, effective immediately. Michael inhaled deeply, nodding in acknowledgement. It was over. But Lisa wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice soft, but carrying an unmistakable weight. "Don't think getting fired is the end of this. It's just the beginning. We won't let this go quietly." Jack's breathing turned shallow. He glanced around, desperate for anyone to stand by him. But there was no one, not a single person. The door opened. Two security guards stepped inside, waiting to escort Jack out. His power was gone. His authority vanished. No second chances. No way to undo what was done. Only a bitter, undeniable reality settling over him like a crushing weight. 10 minutes ago, he thought he was doing the right thing. Now, he had lost everything. The glass doors slid shut behind Jack, severing him from the world he once belonged to. He was out. No job, no allies, no defense. The same colleagues who once laughed with him now turned away. Some avoided his gaze entirely, as if afraid to be associated with this disgrace. Jack walked through the long hallway toward the employee locker room. His hands were stiff, his mind blank. It had all happened too fast. Sarah stood near the inventory counter, watching him with a look that was both pitying and cautionary. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke loud and clear. "I warned you." Jack swallowed hard, but his pride wouldn't let him show weakness. He pulled open his locker, methodically gathering his things, his fingers trembling despite himself. Behind him, hushed voices whispered, "Did he really get fired?" "Of course. Emily Parker handled it herself. I heard it was over discrimination, treating customers differently." Every word stabbed into him. He gripped the strap of his bag tightly and slammed his locker shut, the sound echoing through the room. Sarah flinched. She sighed, her voice softer now. "Jack, think about it. Maybe." "I did nothing wrong." Jack cut her off, his voice tight with frustration. He spun around, eyes flashing with a mix of anger and humiliation. Sarah blinked, stepping back slightly. Really? Then why are you standing here with nothing left? Jack had no answer. Just moments ago, Jack had been the one deciding who stayed and who left. Now he was the one being forced out. As Jack dragged his feet toward the back exit, inside the conference room, Emily Parker wasn't finished. She removed her glasses, rubbing her temples briefly before turning to Michael Reynolds, the store manager. "Michael," she said, her voice still cold as steel, "do you understand why I'm here?" Michael swallowed hard, feeling as though he too was on trial. I saw the security footage," he admitted. "I acknowledge that Jack acted inappropriately." Lisa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Her voice was calm, but sharp. "Inappropriate? He threw customers out of your store based on nothing but his own bias. And you think Jack is the only problem here?" Michael stiffened. Emily nodded toward Lisa before fixing her gaze back on him. "She's right," she said. "If this were just one employee making a mistake, I wouldn't have had to come here myself." Michael started to argue, but one look from Emily shut him down. She picked up her iPad, scrolling through a long list. "Do you know what this is?" Michael shook his head. Emily placed the iPad down on the table, not forcefully but with finality. "A list of complaints filed against this store over the past 6 months." A chill ran down Michael's spine. Lisa tilted her head. "Let me guess. No one ever actually dealt with them, did they?" Michael looked down, unable to deny it. David exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Not surprising." Emily took a sip of water, then set the glass down. "I didn't come here just to fire one employee," she said, her words cutting like a blade. "I came to fix a much bigger problem." Lisa nodded, her eyes keen. "Good, because I don't want this to end with just one person losing their job." Michael looked at Emily, his voice lower now. "So what are you going to do?" Emily raised an eyebrow, leaning back in her chair. "The real question is, what are we going to do?" Silence fell over the room. Lisa and David exchanged glances. They knew this was only the beginning. Outside, the night had deepened. Jack stood just beyond the back entrance, the cold air hitting him like a punch to the chest. He turned to look at the large, gleaming Vander Co sign. Just hours ago, this place had made him feel powerful. Now, he was nothing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Jack pulled it out, glancing at the screen, a flood of messages from friends, former coworkers, and a few numbers he didn't even recognize. But what made his stomach drop was the news headline staring back at him. "Luxury store security guard fired for racial discrimination." Jack felt ice crawl up his spine. He clicked the article. The first thing he saw, a crystal-clear image from the security footage. Him, arms crossed, staring down Lisa and David. No. The world knew. Social media was already exploding with discussions, outrage, and condemnation. One comment read, "This happens too often. At least this time someone is being held accountable." Another, "This isn't just one employee's fault. This is an entire system's culture." Jack stared at the screen, his mind racing. His mistake was no longer just his own. It had become a symbol, and there was no undoing it. Jack clenched his phone, his palms damp with sweat. He had lost everything. Not just his job, not just his reputation, but the belief that he had been right. For the first time in his life, Jack truly doubted himself. And the only question pounding in his mind was, is there any way back from this? Jack walked briskly down the sidewalk, his head bowed low, as if trying to hide from the gaze of the entire world. The sharp winter wind bit at his face, the sounds of honking cars and city life pressing in from all sides. But none of it mattered. His entire life had unraveled in a single night. His phone vibrated relentlessly in his grip, but he couldn't bring himself to check it. Everyone knew. The store, his former coworkers, his friends, and now the entire internet. There was no escaping this. Jack ducked into a dimly lit alley, pressing his back against the cold brick wall. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but nothing changed. The crushing weight in his chest refused to lift. Then his phone rang. Jack glanced down. A familiar number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Jack?" It was his mother, Margaret Simmons. She always had a way of knowing when something was wrong, even before he said a word. "What's going on, son?" Jack closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wall. His voice came out hoarse. "Mom, I just lost my job." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Too long. "Is it because of what's on the news?" she finally asked. Jack swallowed hard. You saw it? She sighed. Not just me, the whole family, friends, everyone's been calling me, asking what's going on. Jack gritted his teeth. It had spread too far. Mom, it's not like they're saying, he said quickly. I was just doing my job. I wasn't trying to discriminate against anyone. But his mother cut him off. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't harsh. It was disappointed. Jack, stop lying to yourself. Jack froze. Not because her words hurt him, but because they hit exactly where he had been trying to avoid. She continued, sadness woven into every syllable. Did you ever stop to ask yourself why you thought they didn't belong? Or were you just acting on what you've always believed without ever questioning it? Jack had no response. A strange feeling twisted in his chest. A realization. A fear. Had he really been wrong? Margaret sighed. I know you're not a bad person, Jack. But sometimes, that doesn't matter as much as what you do. And right now, you have to face the consequences. Jack's grip on the phone tightened. His voice cracked, so low it was barely a whisper. What do I do, Mom? For the first time that night, he felt completely lost. On the other end, his mother was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. You have to decide who you want to be. That single sentence hit harder than any reprimand ever could. While Jack struggled to face himself, inside Vander Co, a much bigger conversation was unfolding. Emily Parker rose from her seat, her sharp gaze sweeping across the conference room. Lisa and David remained silent, but the weight of their presence kept the room on edge. The battle was far from over. Store manager Michael was visibly under immense pressure. He had let this problem fester for too long, and now there was no way out. Emily crossed her arms, her tone unyielding, sharp and resolute. So what's our next move? Michael took a deep breath. I think we need to update our employee training protocols. More unconscious bias workshops. David cut him off, his voice dripping with skepticism. Another training session? Like those one-day workshops that are just for show? Michael stiffened. Lisa tilted her head slightly, her tone even but carrying weight. We don't need an apology, we need action. Emily nodded. I agree. This isn't about just one employee. This is about the entire system. If we fire one person but change nothing, this will happen again. It's only a matter of time. She paused, then continued, her words firm as steel. I want real change, and I want you to be part of it. Michael blinked, surprised. What do you mean? Lisa and David exchanged a glance before Lisa spoke. We want to be involved in the store's reform process. David nodded. We don't just want to see changes from the outside. We want to be in the room, ensuring this isn't just an empty promise. Emily smiled faintly. Good, because I was thinking the same thing. She turned back to Michael. I want you to send me a proposal immediately outlining the necessary changes. But this time, we'll have outside oversight, and those people will be Lisa and David. Michael had no way out. He nodded, knowing that from this moment forward, everything would change. Lisa leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharp. We'll be watching very closely. Emily stood, her voice carrying unwavering certainty. And, if we do this right, this store will never make the same mistake again. Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding. He stared at the headlines, the comments, the sheer weight of the backlash. But deep down something gnawed at him. A video had started circulating. Lisa and David returning to the store, not to fight, but to participate in its transformation. Jack watched, unable to look away as Lisa spoke during a meeting. We're not here for revenge. We're here to make sure this never happens to anyone else again. Something stirred inside him, a question he hadn't dared to ask himself before. Could he have a chance to fix this? His phone still sat in his hand, heavy as a stone. If he called Emily Parker, would she even listen? Jack closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. Then he pressed call. Jack's fingers gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The ringing felt endless. Each passing second dragged like a lifetime. Did he really want to do this? Did he even have the right? After everything that had happened, and then, the line clicked. Jack? Emily's voice. She wasn't angry, but she wasn't sympathetic either. Jack took a breath, forcing his voice to stay steady. I need to talk to you. A silence stretched between them. Then Emily spoke, her voice sharp as ever. Is there really anything left to say? Jack closed his eyes, leaning his head against the wall. I know I was wrong. I'm not calling to get my job back. He swallowed hard. I need to understand. Another long pause. When Emily finally spoke again, her tone had softened, just slightly, but it remained firm. Then come to the store, right now. An hour later, Jack stood once again in front of the glass doors of Vander Co. But this time, he was not an employee. He was a man who had been fired, a man the world now condemned. His heartbeat thundered in his chest as he stepped inside. No one spoke, but several employees turned to look at him, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. Emily was waiting near the office area. Beside her, Lisa and David stood with their arms crossed. Jack's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected to face them so soon. Emily eyed him from head to toe. "So?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "What exactly do you want to understand?" Jack opened his mouth, but every word he had prepared disappeared. Lisa never took her gaze off him. "Have you ever put yourself in our shoes?" Jack couldn't answer immediately. David folded his arms, his voice laced with skepticism. "Do you even know what it feels like to be treated like you don't belong, even when you have every right to be there?" Jack had never thought about that before. For years he had believed he was protecting the store, protecting the image it wanted to maintain. But was that ever really his job? Jack clenched his fists. "I never thought that far." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Then start thinking now." Silence filled the room. No arrogance, no excuses. For the first time in his life, Jack felt ashamed of himself. After what felt like an eternity, Emily sighed. Then she asked something no one in the room had expected. "Do you really want to make this right?" Jack's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Lisa and David also looked genuinely surprised. David raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying?" Emily crossed her arms, staring straight at Jack. "I don't believe in second chances, but I do believe in real change. And if you truly want to understand, then prove it." Jack froze. Lisa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" No one had expected Jack to have an opportunity to come back, but Emily wasn't about to make it easy for him. She looked straight into Jack's eyes, her tone unwavering. "You will not work as security again. I will not give you any position of power." Jack swallowed. "Then, what will I be doing?" Emily's cold smile sent chills down his spine. "You will go through every single training session that our employees take. Every lesson on bias, every discussion on discrimination, you will sit through them all." Jack inhaled sharply. Lisa nodded slowly. "Not just that. You'll listen to real stories from customers who've been treated the way we were." David leaned forward, his stare unwavering. "And if we don't see real change in you, you're gone, for good." Jack's heart pounded. Could he do this? But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "You have to decide who you want to be." Jack nodded. Emily folded her arms. "Good, we'll see if you really mean it." She turned to Lisa and David. "Do you agree?" Lisa and David locked eyes for a long moment. Finally, Lisa nodded slowly. "We'll be watching him." David folded his arms. He destroyed his own reputation. Now, we'll see if he can earn it back. Jack felt the weight of their words. He had stepped into a challenge with no easy way out. Emily looked directly at him, her voice clear and final before ending the meeting. "Don't disappoint us." Jack walked out of the office, his mind spinning. He didn't know if he could do this, but at the very least, he was going to try. Meanwhile, Lisa and David remained skeptical. David glanced sideways at Lisa, his tone filled with caution. "Do you really think he can change?" Lisa crossed her arms, looking out through the store's glass doors, where Jack had just walked out. She inhaled deeply. "We'll see." From that moment on, a new journey began. Not just for Jack, but for the store. And for everyone who believed that change was possible, if a person truly wanted it. Jack walked into the training room, discomfort twisting in his gut. The space wasn't large, a long conference table, a projector screen at the front. Several former coworkers were already seated. No one greeted him. They simply watched, their expressions wary, skeptical. It was clear, they were waiting to see if he was serious. From the back of the room, Lisa and David sat silently, observing. Emily stood at the center, beginning the session in her usual firm, no-nonsense tone. "We're not here to shame anyone, but we're also not here to make anyone comfortable." She glanced at Jack, a silent warning. "We will talk about what happened, but more importantly, we will talk about why it happened." The projector flickered on. The first image on the screen made Jack freeze. It was security footage from the store that night. Jack, arms crossed, standing over Lisa and David, his expression cold, dismissive. Jack's stomach twisted painfully. Lisa tilted her chin, her voice even but heavy with meaning. "Do you see anything wrong here?" Jack hesitated. David leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "If you don't, let us explain it to you." The room fell silent. Jack didn't know what to say. Then Emily moved on. She turned to face him. "Now, you're going to hear some stories, and I want you to imagine yourself in these situations." Jack nodded slowly, his heart still pounding from seeing himself on that screen. The first employee to stand up was Sarah, his former coworker. She cleared her throat before speaking. "When I was a kid, my mother was kicked out of a store for no reason. I remember her crying the entire way home. When I asked her why, she just said, 'I don't belong there.'" Jack swallowed hard. Another employee, Carlos, stood next. "I'm Latino. Every time I walk into a high-end store, I feel like I'm being watched. I have to dress up, wear a suit, polish shoes, just to be treated like every other customer." He turned to Jack. "Have you ever had to do that?" Jack felt his chest tighten. Lisa leaned back in her chair, her voice cold. "Have you ever walked into a place and immediately known you weren't welcome, just by the way people looked at you?" Jack had no answer. For the first time in his life, Jack felt exactly what they were talking about. The tension in the room grew thicker. Another employee, Maria, turned to Jack, her eyes filled with emotion, held back but undeniable. "Do you know what it feels like to be humiliated in front of everyone?" She took a deep breath, her voice shaking slightly as she tried to steady herself. "I was once stopped by a security guard, just like you, when I was leaving a store. They thought I was stealing. They searched my bag right there in front of everyone. I had done nothing wrong. I was just a customer." She paused, her voice catching in her throat. "But to this day, I still feel ashamed when I think about it." Jack lowered his head. He couldn't avoid the truth anymore. For years, he had believed he was just doing his job. But the reality was, he had hurt people without ever fully understanding the consequences. David leaned against the table, staring straight at him. "Being judged by someone who doesn't know anything about you, that hurts, doesn't it?" Jack nodded, just barely. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what he had done. Emily stood up, her gaze sweeping across the room. "These stories aren't meant to make anyone feel guilty. But we have to acknowledge that they happen, and we have to change that." Then she turned to Jack. "The question now is, do you truly want to change?" Lisa took a deep breath, her tone sharp but direct. "You can sit here all day, listen to as many stories as you want. But if you don't change the way you think, you're just wasting everyone's time." David nodded, his voice even more firm. "If this is just a way for you to fix your image, then don't bother. We're not here to teach you how to be a good person. We're here to make sure this never happens again." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Jack. He felt the weight pressing against his chest, heavy, suffocating. Jack took a deep breath. He looked directly at Lisa, at David, then at Emily. "I really do want to change. But I don't know where to start." Emily studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then start by listening." As the training session ended, Jack remained seated. People started getting up, but Lisa and David stayed where they were, watching him. For the first time, Jack felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he didn't feel like the victim. For the first time, he genuinely wanted to do the right thing. Lisa crossed her arms, her voice still sharp, but not as cold as before. "We'll be watching you. If you're not serious, we'll know." David folded his arms. "You have one chance to prove you're not the person everyone thinks you are." Jack nodded, more certain this time. Emily held his gaze for a long moment, then said quietly, "This is only the beginning." Jack knew that. But this time, he was ready to move forward. Jack sat in a small cafe near the store, his hands wrapped tightly around his coffee cup, but he hadn't taken a single sip. His mind was racing. The training session was unlike anything he had ever experienced. No one had yelled at him. No one had insulted him. But somehow he felt completely exposed. Everyone had shared their stories, painful memories he had never once thought about, and now he was the one being forced to face them, to think about what he had done. Jack had never thought of himself as a bad person. But if that were true, why was he sitting here, weighed down by guilt? He sighed, rubbing his temples. Could he really change? Right at that moment, his phone buzzed. Emily. He stared at the screen for a second, then answered. I hope you haven't given up. Her voice was as cold as ever. Jack let out a bitter chuckle. I don't think I even have that option. Emily didn't laugh. Good, because tomorrow you have an assignment. Jack frowned. What is it? A pause. Then Emily spoke. You're going to serve customers. Jack froze. The next morning, Jack stood in front of Vander Co., a tightness in his chest. He had walked out of this place in disgrace, and now he was walking back in, as a trainee, not a security guard. No badge, no authority. This time, he was just another employee, just like the people he had once judged. Emily walked out of her office, arms crossed. Lisa and David stood nearby, watching him carefully. Emily spoke first. You have one job, help customers. Jack clenched his fists. Can you be more specific? Emily studied him for a long moment, then turned to the store manager. Michael, take him inside. Michael didn't look particularly thrilled about it, but he nodded. Follow me. Jack took a deep breath and stepped inside. But the moment he crossed through the glass doors, he felt it. The stares, the whispers, the unspoken judgment. Some employees exchanged glances, murmuring as he passed. Jack could feel it in his bones. He wasn't welcome. And it was the exact same feeling Lisa and David had experienced that day. Jack stood near the handbag display, feeling completely out of place. He had never served customers before. His entire career, he had stood at the entrance, watching and assessing. Now he had to approach customers with respect. Michael stood beside him, tilting his head toward the jewelry section. There, help that customer. Jack followed his gaze and his stomach dropped. It was an elderly man, dressed simply but neatly, leaning on a cane as he stepped into the jewelry section. Jack froze. Something about him felt familiar. Then it hit him. Derek's story. The other security guard had once talked about an old man just like this. Someone who had been treated poorly because he didn't look like a typical customer. Jack's heart pounded. Could he do things differently? Could he be better? He took a deep breath, then stepped forward. Good morning, sir. May I assist you with anything? The man paused. He squinted at Jack, studying him carefully, as if waiting to see if he was truly sincere. Just looking, the elderly man said, his voice deep but not unkind. Jack nodded. Of course. Take your time. If you need any information, I'm here to help. The man continued browsing, but this time he seemed more at ease. Jack didn't walk away. He didn't stand too close, nor too far. He simply remained present, giving the man space, yet still being available if needed. A few minutes later, the man pointed at a watch. Do you think this would suit my grandson? Jack glanced down. It was a classic timepiece, elegant but not overly flashy. He smiled slightly. If your grandson prefers something refined yet understated, this is the perfect choice. The elderly man nodded, and for the first time he smiled. Thank you. I'll take it. Jack felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he had genuinely helped a customer, without judging them based on their appearance. As the man left, Jack turned around and caught Lisa watching him. She had been observing him. Jack walked toward her, half expecting a sarcastic remark or a warning, but Lisa simply studied him for a long moment before saying, Good, you did the right thing today. Jack wasn't sure how to respond. Lisa took a sip of her coffee, then before walking away, she added something unexpected. Keep it up. Jack stood still. A compliment from Lisa? Maybe, just maybe, he was finally on the right path. Jack left the store after his shift, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. He wasn't fully forgiven. People still doubted him. But today, he had done something right. As he walked home, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Mom, how was today? Jack stared at the screen for a moment, then slowly typed his reply, better. Hitting send, he took a deep breath and kept walking. There was still a long way to go, but this time, he was ready to take it. 3 days later, Jack stood in the employee break room, adjusting his tie in the mirror. That familiar anxiety still lingered, but it wasn't as overwhelming as before. Since returning to Vander Co., he had begun to understand that change wasn't instant. He had learned how to serve customers without judging them. He had realized how dangerous his assumptions had been. But did others truly believe he had changed? Today was a busy day. Employees moved swiftly between the counters, assisting customers non-stop. Jack kept his composure, focusing on his job. But as he turned to help a new customer who had just walked in, his heart clenched. Caroline Parker, Emily's mother, and one of the store's longest-standing VIP customers. Caroline was a powerful woman, exuding an air of confidence and sharp intellect. She had been shopping at Vander Co. long before Emily had become regional director. Jack swallowed hard. He knew this was not just another customer. Caroline walked straight to the jewelry section, running her fingers over a sapphire necklace. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward. This was his next test. This time there was no arrogance, no assumptions, only one simple question. "Good evening, ma'am. How can I assist you?" Caroline looked up, her gaze sharp and observant. She knew who he was. She knew everything that had happened. Lifting the sapphire necklace, she turned it under the light. "What do you think of this piece?" Jack kept his voice steady. "It's a timeless design, elegant but never outdated. If you appreciate sophistication with a subtle charm, this is an excellent choice." Caroline raised an eyebrow slightly, as if evaluating his response. "Do you think it suits me?" Jack nodded confidently. "I believe it would complement your presence perfectly." A brief, almost imperceptible smile touched Caroline's lips. She set the necklace down. "All right, I'll take it." Jack exhaled quietly, relieved. But just as he was about to step away, Caroline spoke again. "You do realize you nearly destroyed your entire career, don't you?" Jack froze. Caroline turned fully to face him. This time, her gaze wasn't sharp. It was raw, direct. "You can take all the training courses in the world, but if your heart doesn't truly want to change, none of it will matter." Jack clenched his fists slightly, a flicker of nervousness stirring in his chest. But then he looked straight into Caroline's eyes. No flinching, no avoiding. "I know." A long silence stretched between them. Then, Caroline gave him a small nod, a silent acknowledgement. As she left the store, Lisa and David had been watching from afar. David murmured, "That was a big test, and he just passed it." Lisa didn't respond immediately. She simply observed Jack, the way he stood calmly, not defensively, the way his focus no longer wavered in insecurity. Finally, she spoke in a measured tone. "Looks like he's heading in the right direction." Emily, standing nearby, overheard their exchange. She smirked slightly. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he's actually doing the right thing. Jack didn't know that conversation had taken place, but as he returned to the counter, he felt lighter than ever. Maybe, just maybe, he really had a chance to make things right, and this time, he wouldn't waste it. Jack stood outside Vander Co., watching the warm glow of the store lights spill onto the pavement. A gentle evening breeze brushed past him, but it no longer felt distant or unfamiliar. He thought about everything that had happened. The moment he crossed his arms in judgment against Lisa and David, the moment he was fired, the stories he had listened to, the lessons he had learned. He was no longer the same person. For the first time, he didn't just realize he had been wrong. He truly wanted to do right. And he knew that change wouldn't end here. Because change isn't a destination. Change is a journey. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever unknowingly judged someone based on their appearance? Have you ever felt out of place because of the way others looked at you? Maybe we are not Jack. But all of us have made mistakes at some point. And more importantly, we have the power to change. If you believe in second chances, in growth, and in doing better, like, share, and subscribe to Aiva Stories for more inspiring content. Spread the message, make a difference. If this story touched your heart, help share this message by hitting like and share this video with your friends and loved ones. Someone out there might need to hear this today. And don't forget to subscribe to Aiva Stories so you never miss another inspiring story that can change perspectives and lives. Thank you for watching. Remember, even the smallest action can change a life. Bookmark back.